We've talked before, I have a real passion about behavioural economics, how people think, why they think, and how that is used or can be used within your business. And I saw this really interesting video about behavioural economics the other day, and it was about Shreddies. And Shreddies did this study.
Hang on. Shreddies, like the
so the little square hatched,
like mini waffles.
Yeah, like mini waffles.
Cereal, because I didn't eat a lot of cereal.
Yeah.
Okay,
so Shreddies did this study.
Not shredded wheat.
No, not shredded wheat. Just the little teeny weeny squares.
The ones that taste like cardboard.
Yeah.
Okay. just for clarity.
I know. I don't eat them either. They did this study where they basically took their marketing. So Shreddies historically have always been marketed in a square shape, and they turned them kind of 45 degrees and made them diamond shape, and they did packaging and this whole marketing campaign, and they put it in front of user groups, and they marketed them as this new product that Shreddies had called Diamond Shreddies. And they did taste tests and studies about the marketing and all this kind of stuff. And the upshot was basically most people in the study really bought into this whole campaign about, it's a new product, it must be new, it must be amazing because it's new, and diamond must be better than square. And then at the end of it, they basically revealed that actually it was the exact same product, but they just turned it, 45 degrees and put a whole load of branding and marketing behind it. And it was a study, not an actual product. So people aren't feeling duped in the sense that, they've bought something because it was just a study. But a lot of people were like, of course, like never thought about it like that. And it just kind of really highlighted how important perception is to everything. You can have the same product, market it in a different way, and people think that it's new, even if they know about the original product, even if they know Shreddies already, they might have eaten it. But, present it in a slightly different way, give it a good marketing spin on it, and people will still buy into it. In fact, some of the people who had previously eaten Shreddies were some of the most vocal about how amazingly tasting these new Shreddies were.
Wow.
So I just thought there was something there in terms of business about perception and how you can tweak the perception of your business or your products to people, whether they're existing customers or never seen you before, in a really interesting way. Have you ever seen anything like that happen in business, in an actual product base?
I'm trying to think, as you're talking, I'm trying to think if I've come across that, and I'm still trying to get my head around taking a product, changing nothing about it, other than turning it in photos by 45 degrees, in videos. So and then marketing it as something new. And I know we talked several weeks ago in an episode about and in a locker room event as well, and a client day about what we can do in the current economy, not to take advantage of it, but just to make sure as businesses we were still here. Mm-hmm. And thinking about, do you have existing products that you could sell to different markets? Do you have different products that you could sell to your existing market? Yeah. But also, how can you tweak any existing products to maybe give the impression, I suppose, or of being more premium or just different, to freshen things up, or new. Exactly.
Psychologically, humans have this love of new,
shiny new things.
We want it to be new. We want to be the first to have that product or have the best. Yeah. So that's why it was really interesting study, because it was the exact same product, but it was just twisted in a way that, twist is the wrong word, but marketed in a way that changed the perception, spun in a way, to make it feel new and exciting and different, that got people buying into that. And I think there's a real lesson there to be learnt by businesses, that you don't always have to have a new product or a new service. You can actually present it, repackage it, give it a new name.
I think there's definitely a scenario that very similar to this that I've come across, and whilst it wasn't deliberate, I think it's a good reinforcement of it, and that's wine tasting.
Okay.
So I don't know if I've done I should say this out loud. I've done a lot of wine tasting. Okay, I'm not a wine buff. I like my wine.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you whether it was laid in 1951 or 1952. I can just about tell the difference between a white and a red, and I know what reds I like and so on. And I hate oak to Chardonnay. So yeah, I remember going to, funnily enough, a corporate wine tasting. So we were at this big networking event, and obviously the organisers of the network, whatever, had invited one of the businesses in the room to showcase their products as part of a bit of an exhibition, an event, and they happened to sell wine. And it was fascinating because we did the wine tasting at 2 points during the day, and we did a kind of fairly thing of standard wine tasting and which one do you like best, and then he brought out what the wine was, and yes, there was a Chardonnay in there I liked, okay. And this was at like 8 o'clock in the morning, 7:45, you know, and it was definitely tasting at that point, okay? You know,
did you spit it out?
The spittoons were well used at 8 o'clock in the morning, which is a good sign, because I kind of figure if anybody was swallowing, then, you know, maybe they had a bit of a problem. But there were well used spittoons, which was fine. But what was fascinating is that, so we had like 6 wines, and we tried them all. What do you like? Mark them out of 10, all the rest of it. And then he would tell us how much they cost afterwards and what they were. And then he said, okay, really, really good. We kind of did the event. It was an all-day thing. And this is several years ago, so I can't remember the detail. But then after lunch, he brought us all back out again. He said, right, we're going to do the same thing again. I've got some new wines for you, some different ones to try. Have a play with these and think, you know, tell me what you think and which ones you like. So we went through exactly the same process again, and then he unveiled the wines. They were all the same wines that we tasted in the morning, exactly the same ones, but everybody picked different wines as their preferred wines.
Okay.
Everybody. And what he was trying to explain to us is that your taste buds don't just evolve as you go through life, but they evolve through the day as well. Kind of different parts, apparently, of your taste buds and where they are kind of wake up at different times, if you like, and they're more it's just something to do with, you know, we're not necessarily used and conditioned to eating first thing in the morning because food was not always available. You tended to eat later in the day, so a lot of your sort of taste buds are just not ready to work properly, and then as the day goes on, and after you've eaten as well, they're a little bit more, hey, I'm here, keep using me kind of thing. I don't understand the science, but it was fascinating. But it got me thinking that actually, when you present something, just listening to what you were talking about, so they've taken, Shirley's have taken, other breakfast cereals are available, I suppose we should say that.
Yeah.
We're not sponsored by Shirley's yet. But they've taken a product, flipped it by 45 degrees, you know, turned it into a diamond. And I guess you could take an average wine, and depending on when you got people to taste it, could very much change people's perception of what that wine is, and therefore how much you charge for it. Yeah. So you could take a relatively low-cost wine, recognise that if people tasted it in the afternoon versus the evening, say, they favoured it more, put the price up on it, and you're massively increasing your margins. Now that's fine, because the person tasting it is going, ooh, that's a lovely wine. Once they've tasted it and told themselves it's a lovely wine, and then paid a price appropriate to that value, they're never going to, when they get home and drink it in the evening, go, oh, actually, that's not as nice. Yeah. They'll continue to reinforce the message that they got when they first tasted it. Does that make sense, kind of thing?
I mean, it's like the whole champagne versus Prosecco. Yeah. Essentially, they're the same thing, but champagne can be called champagne because it's grown in the Champagne region. Yep. That's the only difference.
Same with English sparkling wine.
English sparkling wine and lots of other sparkling wines around the world as well. But there's a perception that champagne is better. But it's got this premium perception around it that, you know, people are willing to pay double, triple the price for a bottle of champagne versus a bottle of Prosecco, when essentially they're the same thing, and it's just a difference in perception about the value that has been attached to that product.
And you talked about first, people like first.
Yeah.
and interestingly, and I think this is correct. I'm not 100% sure. I'm pretty confident this is correct. Maybe somebody could tell me if I'm wrong. But in England, there are vineyards that have produced sparkling wine that are far older than wine that's come from the Champagne region in France.
Yeah.
They're first. But they just haven't got the branding right.
But that branding is so important. You think about any product type, jewellery, Tiffany's immediately springs to mind as the premium in that, shopping, you could say Harrods or Selfridges, as opposed to any high street store. Even though Harrods and Selfridges have many concessions of those high street stores inside their main store, there's a perception that Harrods is better because it's more expensive. There's a perception that, that if anybody sells a product that's too cheap, then there must be something wrong with it, because we associate that with discount supermarkets. Aldi and Lidl are somehow... they're cheap, therefore their products are less of a lesser quality. There's a really interesting shift at the moment because of the cost of living issues, and the way that I think Aldi and Lidl's marketing teams are doing a really good job of positioning them not as low quality budget, but as cost-saving people who are working with people to help them in this crisis, and we're with you. And they're aligning all these emotional values to their brand to a point where people are actually saying, well, hang on a minute, it's the same thing. The Aldi Jaffa cakes taste just as good as the branded McVitie's Jaffa cakes. Even to the point where Sainsbury's and Tesco's now price match against them. That's a real shift in, you think back even 4 or 5 years ago, Aldi and Lidl were the cheapo supermarket that you went to if you really couldn't afford to go to Tesco's or Sainsbury's. And there's been a massive shift in perception about not only what people think of them, the way that their marketing teams have positioned them. And I think that's true in any sector. It doesn't matter whether you're a photographer or a carpet cleaner or a business service, whatever it is. There'll be an example in your niche where there's people offering the same service at a very cheap price, and there's people offering it at a much more expensive price than perhaps you are. But people's perception about what value they attach to that service changes based on where that price point is and what they feel like the value is that they're getting from that.
And I think it's interesting because I saw an article this morning, actually, or briefly saw the headline of an article that I think it's Aldi is up at the 4th biggest supermarket in the country now. And what I find fascinating is that whoever is doing their marketing really understands the psychology behind buying behaviours, if you like. Yeah. Okay.
They've been helped by the economic situation, but they've done a really good job of taking that and making it work for them.
And I think that's the point I was kind of going to jump on, is that what they're doing is they're being really smart in the way that they're reflecting the language that people in the newspapers, social media are using. Cost of living crisis, energy prices, we need to energy
heat
saving,
versus eat,
all that sort of stuff. And I don't read the paper, so I find it difficult but you know what I mean. And I think we can all kind of very easy to look at social media, look at papers, TV, news channels, whatever, and you see the same phraseology going on over and over, because it's language that almost people are just getting used to talking about now, and it's happened very, very quickly. Where those, let's call them the budget supermarkets, just for lack of another term, well, they're clearly not anymore, but where they've been really, really smart is they're really tapping into the language that their prospects are using and reflecting it back to them. Yeah. And, let's face it, the owners of Aldi and Lidl do very, very well for themselves. They're not their own customers. No. But they really, really understand the power of psychologically understanding the desires, the basic fears and needs of their prospective customers, and matching their message to that prospect. I think I saw something a couple of weeks ago. Actually, it was a friend of mine talking about the big changes in marketing that he feels are going to come up. And he's a very smart marketer, far smarter marketer than I am. And he was talking about that in such every medium, if you like, now is, you go back 100 years, 50 years, people were newspaper advertising space was a premium because it was the only platform you could advertise. And therefore people fought over it, and that drove prices up. And there was only so much space because a newspaper can only be so big. Okay, if it's a paper that's full of adverts and not, articles and content, people won't buy it. And the trouble is that every medium you're in now, whether you're on LinkedIn, whether you're on TikTok, whether you're still doing Facebook ads, Google, whatever it is, your website, the competition is vast and fierce and competitive. There are, I have no idea how many websites there are now and how many Google searches happen per second.
Oh my God, it must be billions.
Millions, yeah, exactly. So that the competition is so fierce. So what he was saying is that the big changes that are going to happen over the next several years, he was talking about 5 years, is the message that in a world full of noise, you've got to get your message spot on. And it might be that Shreddies, before the science was understood, inadvertently tripped or stumbled upon the fact that you can just literally twist the messaging you've got to appeal to a different audience or change the perception of the audience that you've already got. Aldi and Aldi and Lidl are clearly doing that now with really truly understanding the marketplace's fears and desires and yes, tapping into that because it's a smart thing to do, isn't it? But we as business owners also have to recognise that just being on social media isn't enough.
No, not anymore.
And for a while it has been. But you've got to really, really focus on your message. And to get the right message across, I believe you've got to spend more time really, really, truly understanding, not just in a demographic, where do people live, how old are their car, what drive, how old they are, what car do they drive, kind of way. But really understand their thoughts, their desires, their feelings.
What are they caring? What's
what do
important
they care about?
them?
Exactly. What drives them? And alongside that, as you alluded to at the beginning of this, the way, it's not just what they think, but it's the way they exhibit those behaviours. Because the way they behave in their life is also going to be reflected in their spending behaviours as well, which is, I find it quite a tough concept to grasp because there's quite a lot of science and psychology behind it, but delivered in the right way, it can be so powerful.
Definitely. So what can businesses do then? What have we got any ideas about what can business? I've got one, but I'm asking you first. What can businesses do to align themselves to get that perception out there at the moment? Try again. I think actually the answer to that is not doing something, and the not doing something is, and this might kind of really go against the grain, and I'd love to know what people think about this, but stop asking people what they think. Stop asking people what they want, because they won't tell you. Because people don't know what they want. They know what they think. And they know how they feel.
But they don't know what they want. And even when they say they know what they want, it's only based around the context of what they currently understand, not necessarily against the context of what you can deliver for them. And that kind of, that's deep. And I appreciate that, and it's quite complex. But I think rather than asking people what they want, just listen. Get better at throwing open questions into scenarios, and really listening. Aldi have listened to what people are talking about and their frustrations and their desires to save money and be more cost conscious and concerns about jobs, etc., etc. And rather than going, well, that doesn't affect us, rather than going, I'm not in that position, they've just gone, right, how do we reflect that language, those fears, those desires into something where we become what they want as a solution to the problems they don't really know how to articulate.
Yeah.
Because does that make make sense? And it reminded me of something that I saw the other day, which was if I, and I think this is relevant, but if I said to you vacuum cleaners, okay, so I'm going to design a new vacuum cleaner. What would you want from a vacuum cleaner? A new one. Go back 20 years.
Good suction.
Okay, what else?
A long cord. I mean, it's not relevant now, but you're talking about a few years ago.
Yeah,
long cord.
Okay.
Not too heavy.
Okay.
Those would probably be my top three.
But you probably wouldn't say well engineered, bright colours, okay, and a funky design.
Yep.
But that's what we've ended up with, and Dyson is far outstripping Hoover. Yeah, which was, you know,
the market leader. In fact, to the point where it became a verb.
Hoover. Yes, exactly, rather than vacuum cleaner.
Yeah.
So they didn't deliver because if they'd listened to what people would want, they'd have focused on.
Well, they didn't grow.
More suction. It would come out with a longer cord. They didn't listen to what people, because if they asked those questions, they'd have got the answers that you just gave.
And this comes back to the behavioural economics right at the beginning of you have to spend time with your prospective customers and understand what they actually need, which, like you said, they can't often articulate. There was an interesting study done, and in fact, I think it's in that book that I gave you about marketing, marketing mastermind stuff, is this guy was working, he was a behavioural economist. And he was employed by a company who sold furniture, and they wanted to sell these wardrobes. And he said, well, in order to know how to market your wardrobes, I need to go and speak to people who might buy them. And they were like, oh, you don't need to do that. They just come into the shop and they, choose a wardrobe, and as long as it fits, it's fine. And he said, no, if you're going to employ me, we need to do this properly. So he went to people's homes. They found some friendly people who were willing to do it, right? But and they stood in the bedroom looking at the wardrobe that they had at the moment, talking about what they would want from a new wardrobe. And what came out of it was nothing to do with the obvious, it has to fit in my space. That's a given. That's not even a consideration. It has to fit. If it doesn't fit, you can't buy it. Yeah. What came out of it was a desire to do their best for their children, because they want their children's clothes to be put away. They have a perception about how people view them in terms of how tidy they are. This is what I mean, is you've got to get down to that underlying emotion of why do people want that thing? Not just do they want it, yes or no? Does it fit the space? Does it serve the need? Why do they want it? There's an underlying emotion there, or emotions, of what's driving that behaviour. And if you can understand that and tap into that, then you kind of hit gold there.
Well, I guess it comes back to the Dyson Hoover thing, because rather than having a longer cord, nobody would have said, can we get rid of the cord?
Yeah. But what they understood is that the way people live has changed. So instead of there being often the wife, but somebody at home looking after the home who could spend all week, on a daily basis cleaning if they wanted, they've now got people where both adults in the family are working. They need to be quick because they're tired, so they just want to have a quick hoover of one room. There's the understanding about what behaviour's really behind their buying decisions.
And you never would have got an answer from those people if you'd asked them along the lines of, and I want a vacuum cleaner that's has no cord, that I can hang on the wall where everybody can see.
But what they might have said is something like, when I come home from work, I'm tired and I just need to do a quick hoover or vacuum of this room before I get on with making dinner. Yeah. And they've taken that understanding of what the actual need is and engineered it backwards into the product to say, how can we deliver something, how can we engineer something that meets that need that people don't even know that they want yet?
Yeah.
There's the bit where it completes that circle.
And rather than trying to make the bag more efficient, let's get rid of the bag.
Yeah, because bags are expensive.
And every time you empty them, it
goes everywhere.
Yeah.
And again, people didn't know that they didn't want a bag because they didn't know it was possible not to have a bag.
And that's our jobs as business owners, as creators of
It's to show people what the possible
come up with the option, come up with the things that they've not thought of, because people are always going to give you the answers based on the context of what they already know.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I would say, just to wrap up in terms of what I think businesses should be doing right now, is brings what we talked about, is go and talk to your customers and listen to what's going on in the world right now. And this isn't just about cost of living stuff. This actually predates the pandemic stuff. The businesses that did well in the pandemic were the ones who were able to pivot their products or services based on how people were feeling and what they needed in the pandemic. So, for example, yes, lots of people had to work from home. The businesses who understood the needs of people who were going to work from home did really well. Work desks and ergonomic chairs and all that kind of stuff. Headsets. They listened
suddenly you
and
didn't
understood.
need a headset that was ugly because people were going to see you on the
Exactly.
screen.
And there were some innovative products that came out that had never been produced before. I've seen some like cool backdrops. I know Zoom have got some automatic ones, but it doesn't work for everybody. But pop-up backgrounds that people could put to block, their bedroom that they're working out of. Yeah, that kind of stuff. So people who did well in the pandemic, and I would go back and have a look at some of the companies that did really well in the pandemic and how they pivoted some of their products and services. There's another change going on at the moment, which is all to do with cost of living. And the companies that I think are going to do well are the ones that not necessarily have cheap products, but understand how they can reposition their product from being, it costs this much, to it saves you this much. So the obvious one for me, like just off the top of my head, carpet cleaners. What we're doing is saving you money from having to replace your carpet. That's the pivot that I think we're going to see in the next 12 months. And it's not applicable for every service, probably more than product. But I think there's something there about that whole understanding that people are feeling the pinch and that they're making choices about where they spend their money. So even if you've got a high priced product, you might want to go down this is quality, it's going to last a long time, it's going to be better value overall than buying something cheap that breaks. That kind of language I think is going to be really important.
And don't use surveys.
No. People don't know what they need.
People don't know what
but
they
go and
really
talk
want.
to them, just have a conversation with them.
And listen.
Yeah.
So, interesting.
Very interesting.
Very interesting.
But perception is everything.
It is, I think, and it's all within our own power to change the perception of how people
absolutely
see our products, see our services.
Yep.
Brilliant. If anybody's got any examples of how they've seen products from the 70s and 80s being flipped on their head, or modern day ones as well, we'd always love to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Till next week.
Yeah, see you then.